You haven't been running away after listening to the title, so that's pretty good. The other daunting task I have is that the next speaker is not here, so I'm supposed to extend my lecture as much as I can without boring you. So please we can have some kind of democratic vote. You can raise your hand when you've got enough, and I'll stop. And we can go for lunch much earlier. I won't introduce the Smart Infrastructure Facility at the University of Wollongong. I love the American way of saying Wollongong. I should try that. But no, it's good because usually nobody can pronounce Wollongong. So you've got everything in this small brochure, and please feel free to contact me or Tanya Brown, our CEO. Yeah, that's a barbaric title. Okay, that's the title. Where's this? Oh, that's it. Oh gosh, right way? Yes. Cool. That's quite barbaric title for something very simple. What we've heard over the last, over these 2 days, is some kind of perfect world of infrastructure systems where best practice planning attracts relevant level of funding, which will drive efficient and effective management and maintenance, and will satisfy demand. That's probably the world we dream of. This is not the world I live in, at least in Australia. In Australia, demand drives management and maintenance, that most of the time just running after it. Then planning is running after management and maintenance, and you're lucky if you find funding at the right level and at the right time when it's needed. That's the reality. The point is, people are the essential elements in infrastructure systems. Without people, we don't need infrastructure systems, and infrastructure systems have to serve the people. This is true for the infrastructure networks and systems we have now. And my argument here for this talk and this research we're conducting with our colleagues is the fact it's going to be instrumental for the next generation of infrastructure system we don't even know about yet, but they will be totally decentralized based on cooperation. And we don't have the clue yet of understanding how people will interact in these systems. And it's probably time for us as researchers and practitioners to have a serious look at it. So sit back, relax, buckle up, and I'll take you on a journey. And our journey takes us from Washington to Jakarta, because that's where the whole thinking started for me 2 years ago when we had the chance of having this collaboration with Twitter Incorporated and the disaster response unit of the governorate of Jakarta. I was not sure about the link with the presentation, the great presentation for the previous speaker. And when I saw flooding in Washington, I said, yes, we've got a hook in between the two presentations. Except that the kind of flooding we're talking in Jakarta that might have happened in Washington every 20 years, the kind of flooding you see here on the left-hand side photograph doesn't happen every year. It happens 3, 4, 5, 6 times a year during a rainy season. So basically people, and especially in the slums in the northern part of Jakarta, for the ones who know Jakarta here, have to go through this hell 6 times during the flooding season. 3 meters high water and down, clean up, down, clean up, and so on and so forth. Major issue, of course, for the authorities of Jakarta and for the residents. The beauty of Jakarta is that at the same time you've got these massive third world issues in a megalopolis of 28 million people. This is the capital city of mobile phone technology as well. 28 million people, most of them don't have one mobile phone, they've got 2. And this is the highest rate of tweeting per capita per day in the world, way, way before any capital city in the US. Yes. Why? Because it's cheaper to tweet in Jakarta than to send an SMS. You have to pay for SMS, Twitter, when you've got it installed. That's okay. And they swap from free discounts from one operator to another one. So massive amount of information, which is just social noise for the moment, and a big problem. And so the deal we put on the table of Twitter is, okay, give us access to your firewall, so all the tweets during the flooding season, and we're going to try to make sense with all this noise, transform it into information, and push it into the control room of the disaster response unit in Jakarta in order for them to respond better and quicker to the emergency. The first year we're just trialing the whole technology, and last year, so between December and February, March 2015, we had a full-scale operational tool embedded into the control room of the disaster response unit. So we have a system now where in Jakarta, 20 million people, massive flooding issues, citizens, residents are providing the vital information to the authorities to try to help the residents, the citizens, to go through this horrible event with minimum harm to themselves, their kids, and their assets. It works, we're very happy, it didn't crash, and the whole thing was for us, technically, for the ones who are a little bit into social media and the use of social media for action and not just trying to read sentiment analysis through this social noise, was to transform social noise into action. So these guys in the control room, they have to decide to do something based on all these tweets. And the way we did that was, and we're the only research team in the world for which Twitter so far has accepted to do that. I think the last time they did it was for the Olympic Games in London. They switch off the anti-spam filter. I don't know if you're, who's a Twitter user here? Come on, don't be ashamed. Okay. Come on, Tanya, come on. She's the queen of Twitter. When we trialed, so not this rainy season, but the one before, so we put the whole system in place and we send messages to people who had been already talking about flooding on their tweets, so in different languages, Sudanese, Bahasa Indonesia, or English or whatever. We could grab, and as soon as we were receiving through the filter these tweets, we were tweeting back, saying, well, you're talking about flooding, this is who we are, can you help us to do good for Jakarta? And it went really well. In less than half an hour, we had already sent back 200 or 300 messages. And then came the email from Twitter Incorporated in San Francisco saying, basically, and excuse my French, who the hell are you? So this is who we are and this is what we're doing. And good on them, they replied, say, well, do you know that we've got an anti-spam regulation with Twitter where you're not allowed to retweet people more than 200 times a day? And you've done it within less than half an hour. So we were wondering whether you were a commercial entity trying to spam the system. And they said, no, obviously you're not. This is a fantastic project. So please tell us more and we want to help you with that. So that's how the whole story started with Twitter. And I hope they're going to survive their current turmoil. So that's to set the scene. Fantastic new technology, millions of people potentially involved, and having a direct consequence on the management of assets and infrastructure in a mega city. Beautiful. That's the kind of example we all dream about. If we have a more conceptual vision of what's going on, well, this is the graph that summarizes everything. You've got individual people with their mobile phone or their tablet interacting mainly with their Twitter account, and the Twitter account interacting with this PetaJakarta system we put in place with the disaster response unit in Jakarta. And some people can inform the system through the Twitter account, so that's the bold lines. And some people are just accessing the system to retrieve information for themselves. So that's why it's becoming a very interesting system, where at the same time people provide vital information to the government to act, and at the same time they can retrieve information for themselves if they want to know where to cross a flooded street or where is the next evacuation boat. The two things happen in the same environment. Some people choose to be totally passive. You could call them free riders. They just access information through the website. Other people are actively engaged at providing information or retrieving information. And some others are just sending a photograph of where they are at the time and the level of flooding. And that's the whole mix we have to deal with. So from an IT science perspective, you've got a perfect example of a pervasive information technology system. Now, back to my point about infrastructure systems. The question there, the questions are, who are these people who are jumping into the system? This is an open system, self-organizing, socio-technical system. Who are they? Why are they jumping into the system or jumping out from the system? And how does the system work? As long as we don't understand that, just for a simple case like Twitter in Jakarta for flooding, there's no way we're going to understand how smart grids of the future, our innovative / intelligent transport system of the future will work. And honestly, we have no idea. We have plenty of ideas for about the technology. We have no idea how people will relate to these systems. So let's step back a little bit now and getting to the foundation of this computational justice concept. Well, it starts with computers. Nearly 20 years ago now, people have started thinking, what the cloud computing would look like one day, and here we are, we've got it now. And the premises of computational justice were just people trying at the conceptual level to understand how computers can trade resources between each other in a totally decentralized system like cloud environment. I won't go into too much detail of cloud technology here, but the key concept of cloud technology up until now is elasticity, where the spread of resources across your network, your virtual network, has responsive in space and time to the elasticity of the demand in terms of resources for calculation, for storage, for whatever. And this has been done. If you jump on Amazon cloud or any other cloud, you've got a pretty good service in terms of not the system breaking down. Now, specialists of these distributed IT systems, they're looking at something even more challenging, is the quality of service. And we're not talking here about you as a user of Amazon cloud, whether you're happy with the service for the price you've paid. No. We're talking something much deeper. We're talking how much one machine, one computer would be happy with the service provided by other computers. How can you put into a digital mind the notion of quality of service? And this is still an open-ended question in IT research. Now, jumping into the socio-technical systems we focusing on here, well, the same concept, except now we've got people into the mix. People and machine interacting. At the conceptual level, some of you might have heard about the actor network theory from Latour and Lowe. It's probably 30 years old now and more. All the premises of this interaction of decentralized systems, smart grids of any sorts, are embedded in the theory of actor network theory. In this case, so building upon this computer paradigm I've just mentioned, well, you're talking about prosumers now. People in their houses, they can generate electricity, energy, or consume energy, and most of the time at the same time. But not only energy. It can be true for water very soon. It is already true for information. Each of us in our houses, we are emitters of information and receivers of information. And all these things are piling up. One day, that's the big announcement, the mains will be dead. You will consume electricity produced locally. And maybe we will go back to DC-based systems only. This is not sci-fi. Some towns around the world are already implementing these kind of systems. Forget the mains. Which means that the electricity distributors, they will have to reinvent themselves. They will become service providers, helping people to manage this mess. Because for the moment, with the very weak understanding of how people can interact in these systems, it will have to be a mess. And that's why it's very important for all of us as a scientific and practitioner community to start looking at these issues. And here, on top of elasticity and quality of service, what you're adding in a pure, open, self-organizing socio-technical systems are the notions of decentralization, of course, kill domains, and cooperation. I'm not saying that there is no competition in the system. There will be an auctioning system in there, but not only. This kind of decentralized system cannot survive based on a competitive market basis only. If this is the paradigm we want to push, we're going to kill these systems. They have to be cooperative systems. Not only, don't get me wrong, there will be some trade-offs and synergies, but they have to be cooperative. If they are cooperative, you need arguments for negotiations. Have we thought through the rules for negotiation? Not yet. Again, going back to Latour and Lowe, when you read through the actor network theory, they've already characterized 30 years ago the key characteristics, the key features of these systems. These systems, because they're open, self-organizing, socio-technical systems, they're characterized by self-determination. That's the easy one. Every element in the system, including the machines, will decide for themselves and negotiate with the others. Expectation of error. In a totally decentralized system like these ones, there will always be errors, mistakes, intentional or not. You cannot assume there will be a perfect system. Because you expect errors, you have to prepare for enforcement. Whether there are mistakes that are intentional or non-intentional, there will have to be some kind of retribution based on the fact that some elements in the system do not perform the way they're supposed to perform. Economy of scarcity, that's a good one, this one. Basically, the concept here is the fact that at large, there are sufficient resources to keep the appropriators of the resource, so the prosumers, satisfied in the long term, but most of the time, there will be insufficient resources at a given time and place to probably satisfy everyone at the same time. This is electricity grids as we know them. In principle, we've got enough electricity. There's always something wrong in the system. Water accounts, whether it's in the US, probably, but in Australia, I'm sure, because I made the calculation, we always claim that Australia is a dry country. We can double, in principle, double the population in Australia. We still have enough water to feed everyone in Australia. Unfortunately, the water is not where it should be and when we need it. But in total, over a year and over the whole country, we've got enough water. That's what scarcity is about. Endogenous resources. Again, this is, even if it is an open system, everybody jumping into the system will have to generate and manage the resources internally. There's no God from outside providing more means to it. A smart grid will have, a perfectly decentralized smart grid will have to be totally, from an entropy perspective, totally closed. With this trick that people will be able to jump in and out all the time. So you need to be able to have the resources being managed internally in a system where elements always move around. What is the consequence of that? Well, we can say goodbye to the quarterly billing systems we've been relying upon for many, many years. In a decentralized grid, whether it's water or electricity, the quarterly billing system is a nonsense because it's going to be far too dynamic. And finally, no full disclosure. These are systems where when I enter the system, I don't know who are the other players, whether the machines or the human players, the human entities. And I will have to learn by doing, and I will never know entirely what's the whole structure of the network and who are all the other players. This is a brand new world where you're going to have to trust the network and the elements of the network you're entering. So I was there with all this thinking about my PetaJakarta project, And so I say, I like these features. I can relate to these ones. Now, how can I represent these systems? I can even one day model them to start to understand how people could react in different conditions and situations. And that's why I met my good friend and colleague, Jeremy Pitt from Imperial College London, because he had been working on the same kind of ideas on his own, but much sooner than I did, and started working on this computational justice theory. So this theory I'm talking about is definitely Jeremy's brainchild. What does it say? Well, I just quoting him and his colleagues Busquets and Rivret from their seminal paper published in 2013. We contend that many aspects of self-organizations in open systems and socio-technical systems, such as representation in collective choice arrangements, fairness in resource provision and appropriation, rewards and sanctions in compliance and non-compliance with regulation, quality assessment of self-organized structures and processes are all underpinned by some notion of justice. We propose computational justice as an interdisciplinary research program at the intersection between computer science, social science, enabling and promoting an exchange of ideas and results. That's the big plan. And we're not talking operational models yet. I have to be totally humble and honest on that. We're still at the conceptual level. But nevertheless, we're making some progress. So to summarize all these things that you might have been lost into translation already, computational justice got 5 elements to it. Natural justice, and I'll come back to the definitions. Natural justice, distributive justice, retributive justice, interactional justice, and procedural justice. If we can formalize these 5 types or subtypes of justice, we might have a chance to start creating models of interaction between humans and machines in these very complicated systems. So where are we up until now? Well, if we link back the features of these open, self-organizing socio-technical systems with this notion of justice, that's the kind of matching we have. Self-determination as a feature of these systems can be mostly tackled by what we call natural justice. Mainly, it's the right to participate. In this system, anyone, any citizen, should be able to opt in or opt out the way they want. That's the notion of natural justice. The occurrence of error, remember, that's the second feature. And the enforcement of sanctions, that was the third one. We think that they can be encapsulated into what we call retributive justice. Basically, it's if something goes wrong, according to what collectively the whole system at any point in time had decided, there should be some kind of sanction system in place. And this system has to be progressive. And we need to be able to separate what is intentional from non-intentional, at least from a stochastic perspective. The fourth point, economy of scarcity. Well, it's familiar with fairness and efficiency criteria. So it's some kind of Pareto efficiency equilibrium for the ones who are into game theory. And this is what distributive justice is trying to tackle. Basically, how will we be able to distribute resources, whichever resources they are, water, electricity, information, a mix of everything? What is the best way to do that in a totally decentralized system? Endogenous resources, that's procedural justice. So the first one is basically what would be a fair way of distributing these resources across everyone and everything. And then how are we going to do it? So the economy of scarcity is what, and the procedural justice for to tackle endogenous resources is definitely about the how. How are we going to do that? And of course, that's the major problem we have. We have no idea so far how to do that. And finally, lack of full disclosure. That's all about interactional justice. How can we assess the fact that a bilateral interaction between two entities in the system, human, machine, will be a fair one? So the aspects of all this we've already tackled. And it's, again, mainly Jeremy and his team at Imperial College London. First part, the easy one. For natural justice, they've used the European Convention of Human Rights as a framework and basically implemented as a formal model what's into the European Convention Human Rights Article 6.8, Article 6.1. That's the basis for natural justice, which translates in the model as a right to participate, whomever you are and whatever you are. I thought that you would not be interested in the equations today, so I didn't show the equations. Second one, distributive justice, done, tick the box. It's concerned with fairness of resource allocation again. And this one relies on Resch's theory of some sort, considering people legitimate claims. So let me explain here. And that's what he called in his seminal books, the canon of claims. Because in terms of fairness, you can have two perspectives to fairness. Whether you're an external observer and you some kind of God view, helicopter view of the situation, and you're able to allocate as a neutral being what is probably the fair share for all of us in this room. In this system, it won't work. There is no overarching power that will ever be able to tell which machine and which individuals need to have this kind of resource. Unfortunately, it would be an easy solution. Rescher is saying, if we have to go into each individual to understand what their natural needs are, the best option we have is to ask them first. What do you need now? I need 6 kilowatt. I need 200 liters. I need 200 tweets. And that's the basis for the this type of the justice. Okay? Which is a big call. Basically, you have to trust people when they start asking for something. And then there will be retributive systems later on if these individuals start asking for too much. But the first step is to, in a cooperative system, is to trust the elements of your system. Of course, if you trust them and it doesn't work, you've got the next part. That's yin and yang. So retributive justice concerned with treatment of non-compliance. And here we've just reused Elinor Ostrom's framework about justice. And the big positive adding that or influence that Elinor had on this aspect of retribution is the progressive sanction. I think we all heard a lot of things, and she rightfully got a Nobel Prize. But what she wrote about retributive justice, I think, is probably the most seminal work of the 20th century at the time. Because, yeah, it's not black and white. It has to be progressive, and it has to be consensual, even if it is retribution. So, for the ones who can ask, how did you put all this into a formal model? So we're using event calculus approaches to put all these rules in the system for each of the agents, machine or humans, in the system. So it's already been coded. But this is just only natural, distributive, and retributive justice. Remember, we still have two ones. And they're the nasty ones. So procedural. How things happen? How do we distribute these resources at any point in time and space? That's a nasty one because, again, Elinor Ostrom had a go at it, at least at the conceptual level. But unfortunately, a framework assumed that the rules under which resources are distributed amongst members of the system, of the community in a case, are fixed rules, basically. She never considered in a system the fact that the rules can be reassessed and rebuilt and reshaped by the system itself all the time. That's what will happen in this kind of smart electricity grids or smart water grids or intelligent transport systems we're talking about. So that's something that's puzzling because it has a consequence on how you can use the framework, because Elinor Ostrom take on procedural justice is saying, okay, whatever these people in the system have to do, basically the allocation of resource in total has to be congruent with the environment. It's nothing more, nothing less than conservation of mass equilibrium. This is the resource you have in total. This is the demand. All the demand has to, at most, equal the offer. Because we reassess the rules in these new socio-technical systems all the time, we're not sure we can find a congruent solution at any point in time. And that's a nasty one. So what we propose to do, and that's where our team at Wollongong and other colleagues in Australia start creeping in, is that we're working with Jeremy and his team and Frank Dignam in the Netherlands in starting to implement a model based on what's called argumentation-based optimization protocols. Optimization, usually, there is no negotiation. You know, you've got a utility function, and you try to maximize or minimize. This new type of approach, mainly around the what's called distributed constraint optimization problems, include argumentation between elements. So it's optimization, but there's some sort of fuzziness into it because it depends on the types of rules both elements in the negotiation have. And we are currently implementing a first cut of this and hooking it with the three other elements of the model. The last one, interactional. It sounds simple when you sort of think about it. It's just the way two individuals in the system, again, whether they are human or machine, it's not an important matter here, interact. The problem that there are two dimensions to it. The first dimension is what we call the interpersonal dimension. So it's how well actors and are subject to the procedure they are treated with. So probably something we could think about in terms of concrete notion for that is we all bombarded with information from internet. So you've got many organizations providing you with dashboards, with news feeds all the time. It's been demonstrated that most of the time this avalanche of information is not productive because the format of the information, the timing of the information is totally wrong based on the needs of the specific individual. This is definitely what interpersonal justice is about. Informational is how well the two elements or more in the interaction are aware of the rules of engagement. That's an easy one to understand. It's a card game, and you'd better know the rules of the card game before you start playing. Otherwise, it's going to end badly for you. Again, it's from a purely individual perspective, there's not much we can do. So what we're aiming at with our colleague Frank Dignam in the Netherlands is to use what's called the social practice theory to look at these interactions. And it's an interesting twist. For the ones who have been into behavioral modeling of some sort, who have heard about it in this room, for the last 20 years and more, we've relied on the belief, desire, intention framework to understand human behavior. So it's a very automated process where we all beliefs, we've got desires, and based on all the constraints on the environment, we will have intention and some of these intentions will translate into action. In this very complex, decentralized, socio-technical system, forget about it. Forget about pure autonomy. So what Frank Dignam and his colleagues is proposing to include in the framework is based on social practice. And social practice is saying basically, before being autonomous, we're social beings in these systems. And the social norms will be the one framing the actions. And then you will have the autonomy of the agents choosing between option A and B. But the first one will be the social framework. And is mainly based on regulative norms. So we're very far from Jakarta now. But I told you, we wanted to go to the core of what's going to be the key thing in the future. So we've put a proposal for funding, of course, and to the Australian Research Council. honestly, it's so out there that I don't think we've got any chance to be funded. But we've decided with all the colleagues whose names are on this slide that we will go for it anyway. So we'll complete the first model as much as we can in the next couple of months. And then when we've got the conceptual model, we're going to build a pretty sizable agent-based model of all this. So machines and humans, artificial ones, interacting. And then we're going to start creating contexts, whether it's a smart electricity grid or a smart water grid or intelligent transport system or whatever we want to play with. And that's the interesting and exciting part for me, finally, because we haven't seen my name anywhere there in terms of a substantive contribution to it. I've been into participatory modeling for 20 years. So we're going to create games based on this model. And we're going to calibrate and then validate the model in many different contexts based on interactions with people and as many as possible. Hopefully having an online version very soon where thousands, 10,000 of people can play. So we understand better what will be the rules of engagement when these systems, one day, it's not if, it's when they will be ready to be deployed. Again, when you're going to tell me, oh, it's going to take 100 years' time to do that. Now, back to our lovely region of the Illawarra around Wollongong, south of Sydney. If you've never come, please come. It's a beautiful, beautiful part of the world. Things are happening already. More and more people like around the world are putting PV systems on their roofs. They're putting rainwater tanks in their gardens. Okay, yes. And then they connect it to the mains. But guess what? At the same time, you've got Sydney Water, the agency who's providing water to two of the 4 councils in the region, who have already been, like in the US and Europe, working on digesters to produce gas, to produce electricity, to be electricity neutral for their own operations. They already are in the region. And I've asked them 2 years ago, when did you stop? And they said, we don't stop. We continue. And even more, we're working on co-digesters now, where we're going to suck in our sludge, but also solid waste. And we're going to double, triple, multiply by, we don't know, our production of gas, our production of electricity, and we're going to sell back on the grid. And if the mains don't want it, we're going to start to create, eventually, local grids. What it says there, and then it's becoming very complicated, because they say, well, our problem, we can foresee, we won't have enough solid waste on our own. So they start getting contracts with residential waste, solid waste operators, with private companies, slaughterhouses or anything, to start feeding their digester with solid waste. So back to my very dreamy kind of open, self-organized socio-technical system. It might be that one day, in 10 years' time, 15 years' time, the Illawarra region could be totally independent in terms of electricity, where the solid waste management effort would be reduced by 2 and even generating money. And this is a brand new world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A really good presentation, and I generally speaking agree most of what you said. The precursor to the world that you're envisaging is in fact a new distribution architecture, which allows communities to have the connected elements, whether on a local or microgrid, to capture and harvest and manage their water systems, or smart electricity, smart lighting, and integration. So my system that I've developed, that looks to that urban adaptation as a physical operating system that allows the application, which you so eloquently talk about, to actually function and work.
Totally agree. When I heard your presentation, I say, great. And I was expecting the kind of questions and comments you had. It's going to cost a bomb.
No.
No, but that's in the current system we're living in. of infrastructure planning, funding, management, you're going to hit the wall again and again and again in developed countries. So my message is, and back to Jakarta in some kind of odd feedback loop, I think innovations will happen in these kind of mega cities. Sorry. Massive problems, massive demographic growth, not entirely poor, but not very flash with money, or they're going to have to really focus on what they want to spend their money on. The governance system is weak at least, at best. So any solution you can provide them with, because the situation is such a mess, they have nothing to lose. Whereas in our system, whether it's Australia, the US, or Europe, while you're fighting with a well-established system, whether it's in terms of governance, in funding, or technology, and you will always be the outlier, because so far so good. And we still are at least I'm talking for Australia only, because I think we had with the previous speaker very good examples of really transformative change. In Australia, up until now, we don't have much of transformative change in terms of urban environment and infrastructure systems. And again, I think that I started my career in Africa, and the best innovation I've ever seen in agricultural research and development at the time were there. And when it was coming in terms of participation, we had in place participatory modeling in Western Africa with people who'd never seen a computer before. And when I came back to France, I said, well, we've got this great way of engaging with people. Everybody pushed back, said, no, we know how to do things here. So,
about Jakarta, going back to that with Dutchmen who like swampy territory, and they set up a city in the tropics, thinking that they could manage it and have little islands and canals. And so in Jakarta, you have a natural swamp, which floods 3 or 4 times a year. So we're finding out where people are when it is flooding, but we really don't have much of a solution for the flood, apart from putting raised pathways, a bit of a Venice situation. So how do you think we're going to, I mean, the physical reality there is that there are always
First, on the historical part, I've been living before coming to Australia 5 years in Jakarta, so I've been way more often than I wished at the time. To be fair, the Dutch did a good job at the time. For the size of the city, the size of the population at the time, this was the best they could do. Whether they should have built the city there in the first place, well, to be debated. The problem of this city, it's got all the problems that other cities, mega cities in the rest of the world, they've got 1 or 2 of the problems. In Jakarta, they've got all of them. So it's built, the delta itself is slightly under the sea level. So there's been a sea wall there for quite a while, which is impressive. You've got houses there. You've got this bloody thing 3 meters high, and you can see the boats floating. I'm not joking. And you've got 10 million people living in the CBD of Jakarta, just behind the wall. In earthquake zone, not because it's sediment, that's okay. I think they've tremors from time to time. You've got massive subsidence. It's a delta, and they're pumping fresh water for all these big conglomerate they're building everywhere. So it's sinking by centimeters per day now in some part of the city. By day, per year, sorry, not by day. 2 things: massive population, planning is a joke, and the management of the infrastructure, again, it's a guess game, basically. When we asked for the map of their assets for flood control, nobody could give us a map or even the status of the pumps and the gates. So we did it. And we used, again, people with their mobile phone. They took pictures of everything. And within 3 weeks, we had a fair understanding of the network and the status of the assets. So back to your point, yes, and so you've got climate change and blah, 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 blah. That's, as you probably know, if you know a bit of history of Indonesia, they're the world champion of what they call transmigracy, so moving people, a lot of people from one island to another one, with, let's say, at least contrasted results from a social perspective. They've tried this in Jakarta. So they try to remove these people from the slums and put them onto the outskirts. And when we're talking outskirts, we're talking 3 hours away from where they made their living with the little shops. And of course, there's a strong pushback. So this project started as a community empowerment project, believe it or not. We had a young postdoc who had been coming from University of Michigan and already working there with the associations to fight against the government. And when we saw that, so well, can't we be a bit more proactive and a bit more, trying to negotiate with the government? And that's how we came up with this project, and everybody is happy with that. Because the fact to move the people out in Jakarta, as usual, it's not a matter of protecting people. It's a matter of building more condominiums where the slums are because there's money to make. So moving people is the wrong solution from the start, because there will be even more people and more draining on the resource if we let this happen. So it's a catch-22 kind of problem. So to be honest here, we try to solve the problem at the level of the flooding season. We have no handling on the bigger picture.
Thank you very much for your thought-provoking presentation. I have two observations to make. One was I was a little bit surprised because obviously you talked about the open, self-organizing, socio-technical systems, and then you talked about your ideas on scarcity. You then retreated back to the notion of Pareto efficiency. It's a very old-fashioned, neoclassical, equilibrium-based idea, which doesn't really fit into the open system at all. The open system is challenging the whole idea of equilibrium. So that was just an observation, and maybe for you to, I know this is working.
No, that's a good point.
To revisit that. But my more substantive comment is on the way you talked about justice. Kind of a reinventing of thousands of years of philosophical debates about justice, and more recently John Rawls' work on justice as fairness, which everybody seems to agree about fairness. So fairness is accepted, but there is a huge amount of dispute about what is fair. And there are all kinds of school of thoughts about how do we define what is fair. But there is a more fundamental issue, which again I'm sure you will be tackling it in your project, is that somehow the way you discussed about these things is some kind of a political communitarianism. So there is no overarching political authority there. That people somehow negotiate all the contested issues around fairness amongst themselves, which I can understand if we talk about a very small community, but at the bigger scale, is this an anarchic system of political system? There is no arbiter.
There is.
We are not going to represent ourselves in some ways or the other. So somebody actually is there to make sure that the human rights is actually enforced, that the resources are actually distributed fairly. Because the way I understand justice is that justice is the only justification for having a political authority.
True. So 3 points: Pareto, fairness, and overarching authority of some sort, or coordination, I prefer to call it. Pareto, yes. I think I'm not saying that the whole model of the system will be based on Pareto equilibrium, but at local level, in local interactions, it might be that a Pareto equilibrium would be a local minimum that 2, 3, 4 entities in the system would contemplate as the best solution for them. So it's probably one solution amongst others. Fairness. I read the book. Jeremy knows his work, the work you mentioned. No problem about that. The problem of some kind of high-level views on justice, equity, fairness, it's doesn't encapsulate all the elements we have to deal in there. Because if we were talking about fairness, the way you mention it, probably we just have to deal with interactional justice and natural justice. It would suffice. But there are so many other transactions we're going to have to deal with that we have to go beyond that, because justice will be justice for the system in terms of how, and not only what resources we're going to spread and how much we're going to have each of us in the system. Is it a fair and efficient way, effective way of distributing the resource and the resources in the system? So what I'm saying is that what we have in there is this, plus other dimensions, because the problem is even more complicated than that. Coordination, you nailed it. Good. This is something under discussion, so that's why it's not in that presentation yet, because honestly, we don't know how we're going to formalize this entity yet. But to give you, to come back to the Ilawa region, so when I say kill the mains, I'm a bit harsh. Probably the mains will remain. Okay, there will be still some kind of top-down approach to it. Top-down can be in there as a specific entity, some kind of with special powers. But more interestingly, it might be one day that the mains will disappear entirely, but the authority itself, so the distributor in our region, Endeavour Energy to name them, they might become service providers as in coordinator. I entirely agree with you that this system won't be able to work on a plane negotiation, so two-dimensional negotiation plane. It's impossible. We will need to have this upper level of coordination and probably a second level of coordination on top of that. The problem is that we have no idea what's needed up until, so we need to build this model first. Let it crash, because it will crash. Because there will be needs for coordination, but we don't know at which level. Is it between two guys? In this case, the transaction cost is going to be enormous if we need a coordinator for two entities, one transaction only. If it is every 100 entities and 90-something transactions, well, there might be a space in the system to pay for it. Again, endogenous resources, so the system will have to pay for these guys. So, long story short, totally agree with you. This is not viable as it is. Yes, we will need a coordination level. Whether they are the current ones, I'm not sure.
This is really fascinating. I actually worked with there's actually, I think a good example of there's a lot of work around participatory budgeting, where you're allowing for space within budgets, and really entities that the overarching master working with seconds for trying to bring neighborhoods agree on. And it's really live dynamic today, budget priorities. So I think there's a lot of really in the US as well. So it's just fascinating.
I think, just to complement what you said and answering even further, I'm not saying that this will apply to every aspect of our life, as in some kind of mega kibbutz or kolkhoz of some sort. Okay, it's just that for some, if we're talking really about the next generation infrastructure, as it is the theme of this symposium, this is the pointy end of it, and are we ready for it?
So the idea of community property that owns, for example, the physical access infrastructure that the utilities occupy and pay rent,
Yep.
Is a bypass mechanism for such huge centralized funding. So in most places, value goes up. If you've got abundant water, your carbon value goes up. If your trees are bigger, it goes up. If the streets are cleaner and quieter, and you've got electric car functionality, the whole value of your neighborhood rises. So the community is incented to invest in.
Yep.
If they get a commercial benefit, by putting their $12,000 a house in, and they're making 15% per annum, is what the current economics look like. Because so much of the civil access infrastructure is an embedded cost of all of the utilities. It's terribly, terribly efficient.
Yeah, totally agree. Again, this is the dimension, the financial one that we haven't explored entirely by far and large. But back to the AOR as an anecdotal example, two things are happening. One is community-based credit for renewable energies. As some of you might know, no longer the current government, the government from yesterday in Australia slashed most of our credit and rebates to renewals, which was a shame, honestly. And so many people who wanted to put PVs on and small enterprises in towns. So some communities in our region started organizing themselves, and the community is funding. So they're all shareholders, and they fund a PV system for the local club, for the local butcher, and then they've got a little bit of credit interest on their investment as time passes by, when the club in this case is saving a lot of money on its energy bill. It's already happening. Another thing that doesn't happen in our region but happens in Southeast Queensland around Brisbane, some councils have started revolving funds based on how much credit they could get for direct action for climate. And so they take rural land, improve it with trees and things, and then sell it back as improved with a charter for the new owner to do this and that, or to do the good things. And everybody's happy. And the margin, the markup they make on the sale is going back to the revolving fund. So all these mechanisms start to kick in. We just have to put them together now.
I'll just say that the advantage of to ask the question of the comment. This pulls together so many fascinating areas. It's really exciting research. And I'm wondering, in relation to some of the questions about participation and justice and fairness, if there's a role for empathy in this model as well, thinking about the role that empathy plays in especially responding to crises, and how that factors into a kind of self-governing model as well. So I'll just put that out.
Oh, wow. I'll think about it. Yeah, I wish. I've worked on empathy on other models, but yeah, that would be nice. Thanks for that. Yeah, I'd like it to appear. And it would be nice going back to the Jakarta, because that's part of it. That's part of my why. Why are people doing it?
Thank you so much for a great presentation.